Casandra Darlin here with Darlin Discussions. Today, my guest is Charlie Crockett, and he is with Unbound Waco, and they are an anti-human trafficking program, company, whatever, company.
Yeah, nonprofit organization.
Nonprofit organization, yeah. And so I'm really excited. He's going to show us a very small clip of his presentation about what they do and how they are helping people here and across the world. So, Charlie, I'll let you get started on this, and I'll just interrupt you every once in a while and be totally rude and ask you questions, okay?
That sounds all good to me. That sounds all good.
Great.
So my kind of role, I'm the outreach coordinator for Unbound. And so what that means, I'm just mainly the guy who trains people. And so I'll come in and train professionals and students mostly. And so in schools with kids, and then professionals like law enforcement, doctors, teachers, that sort of thing.
What schools have you gone to, or organizations have you gone to around McLennan County? Yeah,
so around McLennan County, we do multi-week programs with high school students at Waco High. And then we're also in La Vega Middle School, and we do multi-week sessions there as well. We do a 10-week long group. And so that's where we are post-COVID. Before that, we were in various different schools with our volunteer base was very strong and active. And so we're working to build that up now after COVID. Now that the schools have opened up and everything's starting to get back to normal.
Oh, okay. Yes. So you've got, your job is really revving up right now.
Absolutely.
It was kind of dormant through the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I came on the team kind of right after COVID had started to loosen up a little bit. And so, as soon as I got on, we started ramping things up. So, so everything's kicking back in and should be back to more normal soon. So, we'll talk about a lot about different things regarding human trafficking, what we do, all that stuff. And so, we just have a little bit about us and kind of what we do at Unbound. We started about 10 years ago in 2012. Really it was just a small group of people overseas doing missionary work, and saw that children were getting trafficked, saw that kids were getting sold for sex and labor and things like that. And it just broke your heart. It broke their hearts seeing that. And so they came back to Waco and tried to figure out what to do about that. And so when they did that, they started researching, figuring out kind of a plan on what they were going to do, plan of attack on how to deal with that issue overseas, and then realized it's happening in Waco. I
just remembered something. I forgot to do the disclaimer again. So anybody at any point, if you are feeling triggered by this, if you start feeling anxious or depressed because of the sensitive topic that we're talking about today, please feel free to put this on pause, take some deep breathing exercises, ground yourself, relax. And if you need to just not watch this podcast, that's fine. You're not going to break my heart or Charlie's. But if you can stick around and listen to this, it's really important for everybody. Thanks. Okay. Yes. Now we'll get back to what you were saying.
Absolutely. No, that's definitely so important. Yeah, that's really good. Because really trafficking is an absolutely brutal, super dark issue, and it can trigger a lot of different things and traumas if you have something like that.
And I know from your presentation before at my seminar, I was so shocked at how insidious it is and how it is impacting everybody. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just a lot of interconnected things, and so if it's, whether it happened, something happened this to you or someone, it's definitely just very hyper emotional, hyper traumatic. So for sure.
Okay. I'll let you get back to this.
All right. So basically when all that happened, right, they came back to Waco, tried to figure it out. And realized it started happening in Waco. It was a huge issue, right? And so people were getting sold on Craigslist. We're finding people being sold on Backpage, and just open postings. And so started looking into this, making relationships with law enforcement, and then everything kind of started out of here. And so we had to clean up our own backyard before we tried to fix the whole world, basically. And so now after 10 years, we have all these programs. We have 10 offices. 4 international, and then 5 in Texas and 1 in Phoenix, Arizona. And so all the offices do different things, but they all do these 4 things. These are all kind of core things within each office. And so this is kind of who we are. So first thing is prevention awareness. We do educational things to prevent this crime from happening. So anything we can do within students and kids and juvenile detention centers and foster homes, anything like that, to educate these kids on how they can keep themselves safe, how they can keep their friends safe, each other safe, what social media safety looks like, what healthy relationships look like. How just speaking value and worth into them, where people have spoken the opposite. All of these things kind of prevent them from being taken advantage of. And so they know exactly what to do.
Now, you're saying kids and stuff, and are you going to mention later about like the ages or should I ask you about that now? Because I remember that being like such a huge shock for me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is, there's some opportunity for that, but we work with people from all ages. We worked with someone, the oldest client I know we've worked with is about in her 60s, 64, 65 years old. And then we had a client not too long ago that was around 5. So,
wow.
And that's just what we worked with. There are absolutely younger victims than that, and absolutely older victims than that. And so, it's a crime, unfortunately, that does not discriminate in any way. It does not look a certain way. It can happen at all, to any age or anything like that. So,
okay,
for sure.
I'll quit trying to mess up the pace of your PowerPoint here.
That's all right. I could talk. Unfortunately, I could talk about this all day, and there's so many different things to touch on and talk about. So, for sure.
Okay.
So we try to prevent this whenever we can, in any way that we can, for sure. And a lot of that happens by talking to kids and doing groups. And then secondly, professional training. So again, I train everyone from law enforcement to doctors, teachers, just regular professionals, really anybody that's going to work with people and see people on a daily basis. One of the most important things that we know about trafficking in the United States is that the nature of it happens mostly through relationship, and it happens on the internet. And so, that's a lot of where the grooming first starts. And so what that means is that it can happen to anybody and look completely different from what we think it looks like in the movies, where most of it is abduction, kidnapping, and that sort of thing. Where in the U.S. it really doesn't take form like that.
So I'm not going to have Liam Neeson coming after me. Neeson?
Yeah.
Neeson. Come after me and be like rescuing me or anything.
Yeah,
like that. No.
You won't hear about the particular set of skills or anything like that. No, he won't be here, unfortunately. And they got that right, at least in the movie too, because most of that happened in Europe, and that was it is more common in different places overseas where that style of trafficking is more prevalent. And it does happen in the U.S. It just is the least likely way that happens that we know of. So the majority of the way this happens is recruiting by relationship. And so what that means, though, is that victims can oftentimes be just in public, and you can encounter them every day. You could walk by them in the grocery store. Oftentimes in child trafficking in the U.S., kids are still going to school. They're still living at home with their parents, whether their parents are the traffickers or just someone else. There's an outside trafficker. There still could be there. And there's a lot of other things that are keeping them from saying something, for sure.
Wow. And
so if we train our professionals, we train the people in stores, we train the people in professions that work with students, work with kids, work with youth, then there is so much opportunity to identify victims, for sure.
Well, I'm really glad that you are training people in businesses and stuff like that. That's a big part of Darlin discussions and Darlin Professional Group is going into businesses and teaching them mental health training for their employees and helping them feel more safe and secure. But also with this, that's helping everybody feel safer and secure in that business, whatever business it is. Yeah. So y'all need to call Charlie. That's what I'm saying. Call him. Anyways, get some of this professional training. Absolutely.
And all of our trainings are specified. We have a training specifically for law enforcement. We have a hotline number specifically for law enforcement to be able to utilize and use for themselves if they're in a situation where they don't know how to handle that, or if they need reinforcements or anything like that. We have specific things for hotel and motel staff, so they know exactly what to do, and we partner with law enforcement on that as well. We try to be specific to where your needs are and what you need to know in any kind of form of work or professional atmosphere.
Yeah, sure. I could imagine like grocery stores too being like a big part.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And then the biggest thing, I mean, why we got into the work is to work with victims, right? We saw the hurting and the victims that needed help and needed people to step in and stand beside them and walk with them.
Right.
And so that's why we got into the work. And so that's what we do in every office, right? We have advocates that do long-term case management with victims. We'll stick with victims as long as they need. We'll walk with them and throughout their whole process, which is oftentimes very difficult and very complicated and not a linear process whatsoever. And so
Right, of course, because I'm
Yes.
sure it's like any kind of PTSD that you're suffering, especially from something like this, that can be so complex too. It's not going to just be one straight line. It's going to be in waves, and you're going to think you're doing better and then backtrack. It's just like any other healing in the human body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know there's a bunch of different facets that happen with the trauma of trafficking, one of which specifically in relational trafficking is going to be that trauma bond that forms when there is abuse in a relationship. And that's common in just abusive relationships in general, but specifically in something like trafficking.
Yeah.
And so we see that alone, that trauma bond alone is so strong that a victim will go on average, go back to their trafficker 3 times before they fully get away from them.
Wow.
And so we will walk with victims, and sometimes they'll go back, and we have to just be there with them and stick through it. They may come back to us. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And we just walk with them wherever they are. We're not going to keep them as much as we may want to,
Right.
hold them and keep them back, right? We're not going to take that role and do something like that.
Yeah, you have to have their choice. Kind of like when people are going through addictions and they always say like relapse is a part of recovery.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, yeah, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It hurts so bad to watch somebody go through that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's something they've got to do before they get totally free of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and the way that may process in someone who's going through that is that you're just treating them in the same way that their trafficker might, in the way that you're not allowing them freedom to do anyway. Yeah. And so they could be re-traumatizing if you act in that way, even though you know that you just have the best in mind for them, for sure.
Wow.
But we work directly with victims. We have a 24-hour hotline number. So victims can call, other people can call to refer. Sometimes we get calls from parents or just people on the street that see something and didn't feel right about it. And so we'll respond to that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can respond right on the call whenever they need.
And if you need it, it's going to be in our description below. Okay? So check that out.
Absolutely. And so we have our number, and then there's the National Human Trafficking Hotline number that I will provide you as well. So
I'll put both in.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, and we'll do that. We walk with victims since the very beginning, and that's why we do the work. So, and then lastly, community activation. It really is, again, we need everybody to get involved in this. We know that one of the big ways that traffickers gain power is by nobody talking about this. So they're going to go to all lengths to make sure that no one says anything about this issue. And so we want to do the opposite and talk about it. You know, I don't necessarily like talking about trafficking, but this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a fun or happy thing to talk about, but it's so important that we do, because you can feel as you do it, you're taking power away from traffickers. And that is a wonderful feeling.
So you should share this and talk about it with your friends, not just so that I can get more likes, but because this is important. Okay.
Yes.
And also I like likes. I mean, who doesn't? But share it on Facebook, share it on Insta, share it on everything.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So this is really just talking about the general scope of trafficking. There's about 40.3 million people in the world estimated around being trafficked. And it's currently
what's the world population?
Oh man.
Like 5 billion or something?
I'm not sure. Something like that. It's in the billions.
It's in the billions.
Yes.
But so this is 40.3 million. That's got to be like 10% or something. I'm really bad at math. Don't y'all judge me because of the bad math skills. All right. But that's got to be like a big percentage, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a lot of people. It's the second biggest criminal industry in the world currently. Second only to drug trafficking, and everyone kind of is familiar with drug trafficking and how big of an issue that is and how much focus and attention has been put on drug trafficking. And
I bet they go a lot hand in hand.
Oh, they very much go hand in hand. And part of the reason it's estimated right now that sex trafficking, or human trafficking in general, is going to overtake drug trafficking in a year now, just because unfortunately people are switching over or putting more of an emphasis on human trafficking, because in drug trafficking, where the product is a drug, you sell it, it's used, and it's gone. Where in human trafficking, where the product is people can be used over and over again, and people are switching over and seeing this as a more lucrative thing. And so unfortunately, we're seeing this rise as years go on.
So think about like all the people who have done drugs. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows somebody who's done drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be where everybody knows somebody who's been trafficked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or has used, the trafficking services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And and we go into also the main presentation I give.
7.9 billion. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah.
7.9 billion. So can you do the math on that for me? The 40 million? Because I'm interested about percentage. If so, you're an angel. Okay, talking to our crew here. All right, 150 billion is the industry?
Yeah, so it makes every year. So they bring in 150 billion every year. And part of this, again, a big part of this that we talk about and emphasize in all of our student trainings and professional trainings is the other side of the demand for trafficking, which has a lot heavily to do with pornography and the pornography industry. And so one of the reasons why this is also becoming and growing so fast is the readily accessible pornography. And so the demand of this is growing, and the demand of this is skyrocketing. And then a lot of this, the nature of trafficking right now, is being put on the internet. So people that are being trafficked are having videos taken of them, and they're being put on these websites, and they're getting money for it. So when people watch this or give it attention. And so what I tell kids in middle school, even when we have our week dedicated to talk about pornography, which they don't really feel that comfortable with, but we talk about it because it's important.
Right.
And one of the things we talk about is that is when I tell them about how readily accessible drugs may be, and ask them, well, how long do you think it would take you to get a drug, any which drug that you may be addicted to? And the fastest maybe they could do if they had the right contacts, if they knew all the people, if they could connect right away, it would take maybe a few hours or something like that. Even if they're in school, they can meet somebody or something like that. If any type of addiction that they may have, whether it's food, whether it's anything that they like to get to, it may take a while. But pornography is accessible in a matter of seconds. At any point, kids have a phone on them at any point. It's right on their person at all times. And all it takes, sometimes whether you're looking for it or not, it could be accessible within seconds. And so that is the seed that is creating demand for trafficking. And it's also could absolutely, if you watch something that is trafficking, could be putting money in traffickers' pockets and contributing to all of human trafficking in the world, in the U.S.
Wow. And it's so difficult for some people. Will talk about porn and, like, oh yeah, porn, whatever, this, that, whatever. And when you see like these anti-porn things, it's like, oh, those are just these really conservative people. But you're not thinking about the people that you're really hurting by watching porn. You're not thinking about the people who are being trafficked with that, the people who are doing it against their will. And I think you said in the seminar too, because a lot of these websites and stuff that they post on there, like anybody can post on there. Yeah. They're not doing like, show me your ID, ma'am, or sir, or whoever, then they're just posting on there. There's no real way to verify that that person is that age, or that this person willingly was videotaped, or that they're totally, not being trafficked is my point. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you're more interested in that, Exodus Cry does amazing work trying to kind of create lawsuits and things like that against these websites, to get it taken down, and kind of even MindGeek, which is kind of over all of it, and to try to get them to do age restrictions and actually scan for these things and screen for that kind of stuff. So right now, currently, you have no idea how old the person is in the videos, and there's no way to screen for that.
MindGeek and Exodus Cry.
So MindGeek is kind of what covers. They own pretty much a lot of the different pornography sites and pornography websites. Okay. So they're kind of one of the heads of this whole industry. Exodus Cry is one of the organizations that's fighting against it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Mind Geek, bad guys. Exodus
Yes.
Cry, good guys.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. Glad I clarified that because
Absolutely.
I was going to be looking up Mind Geek and like, hey,
Yeah.
who's, oh no.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it is interesting where the traffickers really, they try to keep all of this brushed under the rug in the trafficking world. That's kind of with victims, they'll try to get people not to talk about it.
Right.
But then as soon as pornography happens, because they know that's their main driver for demand, they'll try to emphasize that and promote that as much as they can to get people hooked on it and to get people addicted to it. And they'll try to normalize that, desensitize people, all of those things for sure. Yeah. And so this is huge. This is massive in the world, 150 billion a year. And in Texas, so
That's probably one of the largest industries, I have to say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the pornography industry itself brings in $100 billion a year, just them. And so this is, I mean, they're totally interconnected, totally together. It's,
wow,
for sure.
Okay.
So in Texas, we have estimated around 313,000 people that are trafficked in Texas.
Wow.
And that's kind of the big number of labor and sex trafficking, all that's happening from what we know of in Texas. And then 79,000 of that big number are minors and youth that are sex trafficked just in Texas.
79,000.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of kids, a lot of youth that are being just even in our own state.
Yeah.
And so, and if you were to just ask,
is it more rural or more urban?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I don't know if it's really in one place more than the other. And I don't know. It's tough to tell. It's still tough to identify and get true numbers on these sort of things. But what we know is that the main way that they're recruiting is through relationship. The main place they're doing that is on the internet or social media. And
so that could happen either.
Whether you're in a rural area or an urban area, you're desiring relationship because that's pretty much what most people, or if everyone, desires in some form, because it doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship. It could be friendship or even just parental, something where you receive love, and that's what everyone wants. And everyone has access to social media and the internet, and pretty much everyone's on there. And so,
well, when we were talking about the rural, I was thinking there might be some areas out like in West Texas. Let me tell you, I grew up in Snyder, and I tell you, my parents' house, you can't get that internet working at all. They will not be watching my podcast because they can't get that internet working. So, maybe rural might be a little bit lower because of that.
maybe for the better.
Now, I'm not saying all of Snyder. I'm just saying out where my parents live.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
anyway, so there might be some places where the internet's not so great, but other than that, everybody does have access to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I don't know what point I'm trying to make. So let's go to the next slide.
All right. So we'll this is really just describing what human trafficking even is. And so we have this model that basically understands the law of human trafficking. So when we do these trainings, that we can explain to people exactly what this is. So when we're looking at a crime or something that has happened, we can explain and we can know for sure if something's trafficking or not trafficking. So we use this model to have all the components. If it has all the components, then it's trafficking. And so we wouldn't need to touch in brief too much on this, just for the purpose of today. As far as definitions go, human trafficking is labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And so just definitionally, labor trafficking is just anytime someone's forced, lied to, threatened, or they're coerced to provide any labor or service. And then sex trafficking is going to be kind of those same words. So when you look at the diagram, it's all the middle columns, how the means of this happens. And so that's anytime someone's forced, lied to, threatened, or they're coerced to perform any sexual service that's in exchange for something that's valuable, meaning that could be money, it could be drugs, it could be a place to stay, food, haircut, and relationship, right? And so this is anything that's valuable. If there's an exchange going on, if there is evidence of someone that was threatened, forced into something, they were lied to, they were tricked, or anything like that to perform any sexual service, and there's that exchange, it's sex trafficking. For sure.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the important thing for when it has to do with someone that's under the age of 18. So in child sex trafficking, we don't need proof that they were ever forced, lied to, threatened, coerced, anything like that, because they can't consent. And so when we look at a case that we think might be child sex trafficking, all we need to prove is that they were involved in some type of sexual action that was in exchange for something of value, right? So,
because the kids can get so easily manipulated that they could sit there and be like, oh no, that's my best friend, or I wanted to have sex with this person or whatever. But
if they can see that there's an exchange that's of something that's valuable, and that there's evidence of that, and that the action was done, and they're under the age of 18, they can't consent. So, that can absolutely still be child sex trafficking for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we've talked a bit about why we need to know. It's really because it doesn't really matter where you are or what kind of job you work or where you are in community. If you're engaging with people, you absolutely can be a part of identifying for trafficking. And just outright talking about it and spreading awareness about this stuff actively takes power away from traffickers. So the more we talk about this, the more we normalize having these conversations and talking about red flags, exposing things like the porn industry. We really do take power away from traffickers for sure. Every conversation. So within our office, so we started something in I believe 2012, I believe, called the Heart of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition. And so that's basically a coalition that brings together all of the major professionals in Central Texas that work around this issue. So Advocacy Center, the Cove, different places that kind of do this work. A lot of law enforcement are involved. And so we can kind of collaborate, come together and fight this together, better, stronger together.
Right.
And so we put together this coalition. And so just last year, that coalition served 107 victims of trafficking. And then our office in Waco served 56 victims. And we have that breakdown of that. It's probably real small print. But
so the 107, that was in Waco too.
Yeah, so Central Texas.
Central Texas. So it could be like within the 6 counties.
Yes. Yeah. So
okay, so in the 6 counties we had 107, and then the 56, is that different people?
Those are different people. Those are just that we have served
at Unbound in Waco.
Yes.
So in the 6 counties altogether, we've got my math still again, like 160 something. So somebody's sitting there like, come on, Casandra, you can't add. But that's here, folks. That's your neighbors and your friends here. Yeah, absolutely.
And the numbers are pretty interesting when you get into that. Like the breakdown, we served 51 victims that were in sex trafficking, 4 that were in labor trafficking, and then 1 is kind of involved in both, right? Labor and sex trafficking. And typically that could be something like a massage parlor, where they're being forced to work and being forced to give sexual favors or something like that. But what we know is that there's probably more labor trafficking victims than sex trafficking victims. And identifying those two are just really different. It's much harder to identify a labor trafficking victim just because of the nature of how that works. And so we oftentimes pretty much every year will work with more victims of sex trafficking than labor, for sure.
Okay, so why is that hard to identify the labor? Just real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in labor trafficking, victims that are associated with that it's oftentimes the workplace that is happening in. It can be really easily hidden. And so as people that are identifying and trying to see the red flags and see that, unless you're in the workplace or you're in the back or you're on the farm where it's happening or it's really difficult. You don't have many eyes on you. And so there's not as many people that are seeing these things or hearing about them. So the best way by far to identify victims of labor trafficking is going to be within conversation. And so it's really because if you're not there, it's really going to be if you're with somebody, you hear them talking about it, you ask questions, they talk about things like they're not free to come and go. They talk about how their employer is holding this debt over them and saying, or maybe holding over their license or their documents or their ID or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so if there's talk about that the employer's like, well, I'll pay you as soon as you pay off this debt, but the debt never gets paid. The debt just keeps growing, whatever that is. Or if there's physical threats, all different types of threats or violence or aggression or anything like that, all of that is going to be big red flags in conversation.
Wow. Okay. Well, I hate to cut you off because we're running out of time, but thank you so much for coming on this podcast and giving us a little taste of what it is y'all do at Unbound Waco. And please reach out to Charlie or anybody else at Unbound Waco. We're going to have the information in the description, and that hotline number that you can call if you are being trafficked or somebody else you know is being trafficked. Thank you again for that. And it's right there. All right, we're done. That's a wrap.